Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our e-invoicing webinar on what is the impact of e-invoicing for my finance team. Today, we're joined by e-invoicing expert John Paul from Pagero, Documation partner with Pagero to enable compliant and streamlined e-invoicing. We're not going to hang around. We're going to kick straight off with the questions. We've only got a short space of time here. So, John Paul, if you could give us a definition, what is e-invoicing and how does it differ from traditional invoicing?
Well, Julia, that's a good one. I think I can use the entire webinar for that. So allow me to highlight a few observations. Of course, real invoicing, we don't talk about PDFs or scanned paper. It's not something new. It has been around since the 2000s already. We called it EDI, you effect. It was quite costly, and you only did it for a few suppliers. So if we look at today, everything has changed. There are like uniform standards. There are e-invoice platforms which can help you with technology, and that's driving e-invoicing big time. So what is really different is, I would say, it's electronic, it's faster, you can avoid data, it's very obvious. But for me, the most important things are, it's traceable, you can check it up front, and you can already validate invoices before they enter your company. So you can avoid all these typical errors that you were facing when the invoice comes in. And I think the last thing which is different is that it's not an automation topic anymore. With the mandated e-invoicing by governments, it's a compliance issue. So that's a big change from the past. Easier to implement, compliance is a driver, and I would say lower cost than we saw in the past. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So, Mark, how will e-invoicing affect our current accounts payable and accounts receivable processes?
Well, as John Paul implied, we're looking at e-invoice data now. So we're not receiving PDFs, or we might be receiving PDFs and paper, but what we're talking about here is e-invoicing. So what that will do is it's data being received or sent. So it removes any need for any manual intervention, data capture, validation, exception handling. So obviously the impact of that's going to reduce your processing costs, of course. You may need less people to process those, or those people could be working on other value-added tasks rather than keying in data or dealing with exceptions. But along with that, it improves your accuracy. Okay, if you're not manually keying this data, it reduces errors and so on. So it improves your accuracy of the data, and it allows you to validate it, as Jean-Paul suggested. You can make payments faster. We're receiving these e-invoices; they get processed quicker. Obviously, hit your finance systems quite faster, which means you can take advantage of early settlement discounts and things of that nature. So again, improving your costs and income. Along with that, obviously, if you're paying invoices, improve supplier relationships. Suppliers want to deal with customers who pay on time and so on. So that improves that relationship. It's secure and it's efficient, so removes any opportunity for lost or mislaid documents and damaged documents. And as I said earlier, it just frees up time within the AP team to work on more value-added tasks that probably might get ignored at the moment if you're addressing just keying data.
Okay. My next question was going to be why should I start thinking about e-invoicing as part of my invoice process? But I think you pretty much answered that. Is there anything you would add?
It's exactly what we said above, really, John Paul and myself. But the key thing, which again John Paul said, is it's being compliant now. So it's not just an automation decision; it's being compliant with various countries, jurisdictions that have e-invoice mandates. So that decision of automation is taken away to some degree. If you've got legal entities or a VAT liability within those countries, you have to be compliant.
Yeah. So that leads me nicely on, John Paul. Which countries are currently mandating e-invoicing?
Yeah, I think let me start with saying that answer is going to be outdated tomorrow already, because it's going very, very fast. And without going to a list of hundreds of countries, let's focus on some generic trends. I think it's obvious. Latin America is leading the pack for over 10 years. E-invoicing is there, 70 countries live, and they're way more advanced than we are in Europe at the moment. So that's really a reference point for us. If you look a bit closer to home, let's focus on Europe and the EU. All EU member states have already business to government e-invoicing in place. So that's already there. Many companies send the invoice to the government electronically. Now we go one step further. So now we look at the B2B, the business to business e-invoicing. And there we see actually the traction coming from Southern and Eastern Europe. So Italy, Turkey, Serbia, Hungary, they already have that for some years. Romania coming up this year, Denmark, Greece. So we're moving more and more to Central and Eastern Western Europe with those mandates. And we will touch a bit later on when we look at the roadmap for the coming years. I think, so from a mandate point of view, Europe is getting traction. But from an adoption point of view, so where is e-invoice already big, then I think everybody knows that the Nordics are already way ahead without even having a mandate. So that's an interesting observation. And then look a bit further, we see APAC and Middle East coming up very fast. And they're catching up, Europe, but they're bypassing us as well because they're doing B2B, B2G, and business to consumer and e-reporting all in one big blow. So if they do it, they're going fast. So I would say that's Latin there. Europe picking up. B2B in the coming years is going to be the hot topic in all over Europe. And then APAC and Middle East are again the ones who are catching up quite fast with complex mandates in place.
Okay. And when you're thinking about implementing e-invoices as part of the process, how far in advance should you start thinking about that before a country mandate's about to go live?
Yeah, ideally, I think any project we've done shows that you should start at latest 6 months before they go live of the mandate, and then you have enough time for testing, last minute adjustments, etc. So that's the theory. Having said that, in many cases that's not as simple, because governments change last minute, deadlines are not being met, specifications are not being sent. So you can plan ahead very well, but then last minute something can come up and the mandate slips and the date is expanded. So 6 months, I would say. But with all those countries coming live in the coming years, it's really good to see if you could forward some countries like Belgium, where the mandate is crisp and clear. You could start today, meaning that you have some resources available next year when you have to implement Poland and France and Spain. So take that 6 months as a guideline, but start as soon as possible so you have some room for implementing other countries or some room for to catch up when the mandates are delayed. That's what I would suggest.
Okay. And Mark, does e-invoicing improve invoice accuracy and reduce errors?
Absolutely. I think we've touched on this before earlier in the session. You're dealing with raw data. The data is coming in, header data, line level data, and all of that should be validated as it's produced at source. But it's also validated through its journey. So if it goes up into a mandate for clearance, that gets validated and so on and so forth. And then from an AP point of view, when it's received, the AP automation would validate that data as well. So you'd expect that data coming in to be accurate at that point. You're eliminating, as I said earlier, manual intervention and keying. And if you're dealing with intelligent capture, there may be errors around that as well. So it eliminates all of that. It really enhances your straight-through processing. From an AR point of view, obviously, any invoices your billing system is issuing out, again, you're dealing with raw data that you validate at the source. And then from a documentation point of view, we would validate that, enrich that data before issuing that out to the mandate or directly to the customer, whichever it might be.
Okay. And will adopting e-invoicing require significant changes in customers' existing accounting software?
No. You're receiving invoice data in the same way as if you were receiving PDFs or manually keying data right now. So what the only changes you would look today, if you've already got AP automation, is incorporating that, but also that you'd need interface into the accounting system from an AP point of view to load that data for payment. So things like an API is quite common practice, but there are other interface and integration methods of doing that. And again, flip that on its head from an AR point of view, your billing system needs to produce that data so that can be captured into the automation solutions such as documentation, again, to be validated, enriched, and then passed out. So again, that integration coming into the automation solution can be via API as well. But there are loads of different integration methods available, for different finance systems. and for different customers, they might have different and specific requirements that they want to meet. So there's lots of integration capabilities within our toolbox to do that.
I was going to ask, can they be integrated with other automation solutions as well? But you've kind of answered that via via API and other ways of integrating. So basically, what I'm getting from that is yes, a big fat yes. It can absolutely be integrated with all the systems you have and work according to your needs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great. John Paul, how does e-invoicing impact supplier-customer relationships and the way we communicate with vendors and customers? Oh, John Paul, you're on mute.
I think Mark already addressed most topics there. It's electronic, so it's faster, less errors, it's traceable, so that only improves the way you interact with your supplier and your buyer. If there are less discussions, less errors, it's always good. I think that's a big change with the past. 10 years ago, you had big buyers were having so-called closed networks, and they were forcing their suppliers to connect to that. So even if you were sending 10 invoices, you have to invest in one format for one buyer, and that's, of course, that's not really good for your relationship. Now, when you have the mandated e-invoicing, there's no discussion if you have to go or not. Everybody is forced to do it, so it's a no-brainer. And think on top of that, the business case is getting much more better because you not have to connect to one buyer, you connect for all your buyers and all your suppliers at the same time, so you can even benefit from it. So that also improves the adoption instead of you having to do that for one specific vendor or buyer each time. So that's I would say that in general it improves the transparency and the way you communicate, but also the adoption of e-invoicing in general.
Okay. And Mark, will e-invoicing change how we manage disputes and exceptions within the invoicing process?
Again, no. If you've got automation already or planning to automate a solution, there should be exception handling within that, so such as workflows and so on. So you're receiving these invoices, we're going to validate them, and if it's invalid, you can dispute in the same way as you do now. So you may reject that invoice back to the supplier or the buyer to process that. So no, the process remains the same. From an AP perspective, you're just receiving the invoice in a different way, a more efficient way, a more accurate way, if you like. But the processing that's applied in terms of the exception handling, in terms of the order matching, and so on and so forth, that doesn't differ. So your dispute process will remain unchanged. So makes it more efficient in terms of implementation. So users are already familiar with that type of technology, those processes. So it just slots in very nicely into that.
Right. Is it a complex process, John Paul? Are there training and skill development needs that are needed for the finance team to successfully adopt it?
Actually, I wouldn't say no. I think what Mark is saying, the process remains the same. If it was a paper scanned invoice, a PDF invoice, electronic, your internal process is the same. So no skill changes there. That's going to be the same before. I think that the most important thing here is that looking along the lines, what are success factors for a project that you have to take into account? You really have to put some agility in the planning of the project so you can keep up with any changes and deadlines. Really spend time on thorough testing, all the scenarios, withholding tax, normal invoices, credits. That's something we typically see companies are a bit, let's say, not really putting enough time into that one. And I think what's also quite often overlooked is some business process redesign. People try to copy the whole process and they still want to do this and that. And then typically they say, okay, let's keep the whole process and you please for us put some enrichment there, put some extra customization there, which should not be the case because we have a new process and look what you can do different. So agility in planning, testing, and changing your process where it makes sense. That are I would say the key success factors for this project. Not really a skill set, but a way of approaching these kind of projects.
Yeah, and that kind of leads nicely onto what are the timelines and steps involved in that transition to e-invoicing, and how can we prepare our team for the change?
Yeah, we mentioned that 6 months period before, and of course that's not always possible because governments are not giving the specifications like in Malaysia. 1 week before the deadline, you get the last specification. So even if you plan ahead, you're not always, there are factors out of your reach. You take into account the success factors, that you have agility. One country slips, that you can move forward another country without then sticking to, we have to do France first. No, do Belgium first and change another one. If you can, with this in your organization, then you're good to go, I would say.
Okay, great. And just one final question, Mark. Sort of, it's at the end of the whole process. How does e-invoicing improve the audit trail and reporting capabilities for the finance team?
I think we touched on it a number of times. You've got full traceability from its source right the way through to being paid from an AP point of view, and obviously the flip side of that from an AR point of view. So all of that, those statuses and so on, that are applied if they're given through mandate. You know, the clearance status, if the clear is rejected, and so on and so forth. You've got that full viewable audit available in the history of that document from the source. All of that is held in data, you know, so therefore that can support your reporting as well. So it really helps your KPI reporting and your financial reporting, budgeting, and so on and so forth. So that you get to see the whole life cycle from when it gets created but by the supplier right the way through to when you pay that, and you've got the full audit of that. Okay.
Brilliant.
I did want to touch on a point around the exception handling. I thought about, you would obviously expect less exception handling. You know, yes, the exception handling doesn't change, but you would expect less of it because of the you know, the extensive validation you're applying throughout the process. So yeah, but obviously all those exceptions are viewable in the audit. So that finishes that question.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you both. Is there anything else you'd like to add, John Paul, or are you happy with what we've discussed? Yeah,
no,
great.
I think that's a great summary.
Thank you. Thank you both for taking the time to answer my questions and explain it in such an understandable way, because I do think it's a tricky subject, e-invoicing. It's misunderstood, and then when you try and understand it, it becomes so complicated you almost don't want to try and understand it. So for me, certainly, it's been really enlightening. Thank you both, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.